No swearing. All right, welcome everybody. So we are on Q4/1. So basically in the fourth quarter of this year, there are two Fed meetings, November and December. So we will do this again in December, but this one was really pivotal. New word, pivotal. So we knew the Feds were going to raise 0.75%. They did raise it. And there's been some interesting movement. And I'm going to let Tyson get into all of the details about that. But before we start into the technical side of it, let me just introduce myself. I'm Bliss Sawyer. I'm with Security Home Mortgage. I've been doing mortgages for 31 years. And Tyson is my loan partner. He's also my son-in-law. He's been working with me for almost 5 years, actually, and has a master's degree in economics. So smart dude. He compensates for what I lack, so I let him do the technical side of it. But I wanted to start off by saying there's a lot of people in the mortgage world, and I have been guilty of this because I tend to look at things through rose-colored glasses, right? And we say things like, it's the best time to buy a house. Well, there's some truth to that, but it's also a really rough time for a lot of people that want to buy a house. And it's a really rough time for a lot of people in the industry, in the mortgage world, and in the title world, and the real estate world. And so I want to recognize that we are in a tough market, and there are some tough things, but there's also some silver linings. So I'm not trying to blow smoke up your skirt, whatever that technically means, because I do feel very positive about especially our geographical area of Utah. Very positive about it. But I'm not minimizing the fact that there are a lot of people that just can't afford to buy a house, even if house prices continue to come down. So I recognize that, and I'm super sympathetic and empathetic to people that are in that situation. But we're going to get into really some positive things about the market. So again, use the chat box. We're going to be watching that and answering any questions you have there. And I'm going to turn the time over to Tyson.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Bliss. So we'll just jump into this. This is what we're going to talk about today. So what has happened since the last Fed meeting, since we last did a market update like this? Then we're going to recap what happened today at the Fed meeting, what they announced, what happens next going forward, and then a quick market update and some analysis I ran on housing affordability that's new, that we haven't really talked about before, but I think is really important. And then we'll hit on a few things. What can we do in a market like this? All right, so quick, I always just like to make sure everyone's clear on this. The thing that you hear in the headlines, the interest rate that you hear in the headlines is the Federal Reserve funds rate. It's not mortgage interest rates. And that's, I mean, the definition's on the screen. I won't spend a lot of time recapping that, but I just like to drill that home that the Fed funds rate that's in the news is not mortgage interest rates. The Fed fund rate is set by a committee 8 times a year. That's what happened today. It was the 7th of 8 meetings this year. But yeah, just want to make that clear. And then the other thing, I've shown this, I think, every time, and it's a little bit out of date, but the point that I like to show on this graph is that there are periods where mortgage rates can drop even if the Fed funds rate is steady or increasing. So there is historical precedence for that. And I think most recently, I think this is kind of a good example of what we might be in store for, is we're kind of at a tipping point where mortgage rates are there and then they start to drop, even though there was another Fed rate hike and then it held steady. So I think that's hopefully that's what we're headed towards, is that we're at the peak with mortgage rates, and even if the Fed fund rate increases another time or two, we can start to see some relief on the mortgage rates. Okay, and then I did want to just zoom in. This is just this year, what's happened this year. So the Fed rate's in yellow, 30-year mortgage interest rate is in blue, and we've seen, I mean, it's been mostly increases. There was this weird time in the summer where after we had gotten up to 6, we dropped back down to 5. And there was a lot of optimism there. It's like, okay, we hit the peak. It was about 6%. And then after being at 5, we went up to 7. The wheels kind of fell off. So anyway, that's kind of short term, just this year, what's happened. Okay, and then what's happened lately, like since the last Fed meeting, there's been a lot of extreme volatility is the best way I can describe it. And I'm not talking about over months or weeks, I'm talking day by day. There's a service that Bliss and I subscribe to that tracks mortgage-backed securities, which is probably the best single metric for determining how interest rates are going to act. And there's some mornings where it's just nauseating. It's like they're up 40 basis points, then an hour later down 50 basis points. Like it's all over the place. So why has it happened? Why has there been so much volatility? Sometimes we just have to shrug. We have no idea sometimes. And this same service that we use to track these securities, they'll give us what's happening, how mortgage-backed securities have changed. And then there'll usually be an explanation, like this economic data came out and it affected rates in this way. It does a really good job at explaining how each economic factor pushes rates up, causes them to come down. And there's been a lot of phrases like this recently. So MBS, that's mortgage-backed securities, have posted large gains this morning without an obvious cause. Like even the people who are running this service, who that's their life, they dedicate their careers to tracking these things, are like, we don't know why why rates are better. Or with little news, it was a highly volatile session. So it's been kind of crazy. All right, I did want to show this. We're not going to talk about all of these things, but these are all of the different, and there's probably more that I missed, but these are all the different things that affect mortgage interest rates. And I don't think I've shown this before. We've talked about certain things, certain supply and demand metrics and inflation and things like that. But there's a lot. And this is why it's so hard to predict where rates are going to go. Because,
and actually, Tyson, can I add one thing to that?
yeah.
So you could even add to this list COVID or worldwide economic or worldwide craziness, and even
yeah,
today,
I have geopolitical events on here.
There you go. Yeah, and even today, comments, right? And Tyson's going to go into this, but the Feds first came out, market got better, but then they looked at the Fed at Jerome Powell's, I think, his comments, and then the market got worse. Literally, just what he said made mortgage rates get worse. So this is not an all-inclusive list, but this just tells you it's crazy what affects mortgage rates. So thanks, Tyson.
Yeah. And, you know, some of these come out weekly, some of them come out every other week, some of them once a month. So it's this big mesh of stuff that's affecting how people trade mortgage-backed securities, how investors trade, and it's a mess. So I highlighted some of the big ones. The 10-year Treasury bond is a big one. And basically that's mortgage interest rates have an inverse relationship with the Treasury bond. And it's basically, I guess a simple way to put it is how investors are handling risk, because Treasury bonds are a long-term lower risk thing. So when people move towards those, it has the opposite effect on interest rates. So we won't get too much into that, but that's a big one. And then the inflation indices. So PCE and CPI, they're personal consumption expenditures, and CPI is consumer price index. And they really like the one without food and energy, because food and energy are very volatile. So the core PCE and CPI indices don't include food and energy. So those, and that's been all the talk. I mean, the Fed comments are all about, let's get inflation back to 2%. Let's get inflation back to 2%. So those are biggies. Whenever those reports come out, there's a lot of movement with mortgage rates lately. Some of the other big ones on here are have to do with housing. So pending home sales, construction investment, things like that, all play into that. Okay, but I think that's enough time on all that. I just wanted to get the picture out that it's very complicated. And so anybody that says they know what's going to happen is either very ignorant or they're lying, because there's so much involved. Okay, so what happened today? the Federal Reserve did announce the fourth consecutive rate hike of 75 basis points or 0.75%.
That's historical, isn't it, Tyson? I mean,
Yeah, this is pretty unprecedented how many consecutive rate hikes of this magnitude. I don't know that it's ever happened. So yeah, pretty big deal. That's why this was a big one, this Fed meeting. So what happens is they'll make an announcement with a report. It's basically like a one-page report of what they voted on and some comments. And according to that report, they seem to signal a slower rate of increases in the future. So they didn't say that they won't do any further increases, but they said, you know, it may be slowing down a little bit. And I put maybe there because then what happened, well, and I'll get to that in a second. So initially it was good. That's what the market wanted to hear, that the rate increases in the future wouldn't be as bad. So MBS, that mortgage-backed securities, it jumped. That's good.
Let me put this out there. This is very just as a general rule, about 50 basis point is about 1/8% on the rate. It's not always exact, but so when you, because a lot of people don't understand when we say 50 basis points increase today, about every 50 basis points is 1/8%, give or take a lot of factors. But just so you know, rates got 1/8% better, and then go ahead, Tyson, give them the great news.
Yeah. So, and it's kind of inverse here. When MBS goes up, that means rates are going down. So that's good. When you see plus something on MBS, that's good. Okay. And then after that initial like paper report that they released to the press, then they have a press conference where Jerome Powell, the Fed chair, comes out and talks and adds some additional commentary. So he came out and started talking, and all those gains were wiped out because his comments were a little more hawkish, is how they put it, a little more negative than what their paper document sounded like.
And all this happened in less than 2 hours.
Yeah. And then right after that, it got worse. So then we lost on mortgage-backed securities. So that's how quick things can happen. So the paper report came out, everyone's like, oh, great, this is what we wanted to hear. Jerome Powell starts talking and they're like, oh crap. And we just, we lost everything we gained and then some.
And what's that bipolar medicine that we all need to be prescribing? Like we need medication for this. Sorry, we just do. Or the feds do. Somebody does.
And what's funny is this is actually kind of what happened last time. Things initially got better. And then by the end of the day, they were a little bit worse. But then the next day, it got slammed. It was like, was that the one where it was the biggest
1 day jump?
1 day, yeah, decrease. It was like over 150 basis points. Was it that? It was awful. It got bad. So it'll be interesting to see what happens tomorrow.
But don't worry, we do have good news for you, right?
Yeah. Okay, here I wanted to pick out a few quotes from his press conference because I think it does shed a light on what happens. So I don't get, so this is Fed Chair Powell, all of these. I don't get any sense that we've over tightened or moved too fast. We have more ground to cover. So that's the type of comment that's causing, you know, the market to freak out a little bit. The important question now is how far to go. We may ultimately move to higher ground or move to higher levels than what they considered in September. So in September, they set a target rate, which meant a 75 basis point increase in November, which just happened, and then 50 points in December. So now they're saying maybe it won't be 50 points in December. Maybe we need to do 75 again. Then it's very premature to think about pausing the rate hikes. The labor market is very, very strong. Households have strong balance sheets. I think it will take some time for inflation to come down, we think. So again, you can see how these press conference comments are not as great. And then this is the last one, and it's very relevant. The housing market was very overheated for a couple of years. That needs to get back into balance of supply and demand. The decline in housing this time around doesn't have the financial stability risks of the 2008 financial crisis. And that's huge. I'm glad he came out and said that because, and then the Fed isn't seeing poor underwriting like it did in 2008. And that's the huge difference. This is very, very different than 2008.
That's why we wanted to do this presentation for the realtors on this call, is because you're getting a lot of your buyers and sellers that are, saying, hey, peace out, I'm not going to do anything. We're going to have another crash like 2008. And so this is giving you the information that you can share with them that, no, this isn't like 2008. Doesn't mean it's not tough and it won't be rough for a little bit, but here's something in writing, right? So thanks, Tyson.
Yeah. We're seeing a housing decline, a housing correction, a housing, whatever you want to call it, but it's not a crash. It's not a housing crisis. It's not, the parameters around the decline is very different, right? There was a lot of fraudulent activity and bad mortgages being made in 2008. That's simply not the case right now. Okay, so what happens next? Where do we go from here? So we're now near 4% on the Fed rate, highest since 2008. That actually, I don't think I updated that. So it's maybe the highest since even longer, who knows?
2002 is the last one I saw.
Okay. And then a quick history. So in March, they had set the target rate at 2% by year end. So we're double that now. In June, they upped it to 3.4. And now the new target rate is 4.25%. And there's only one meeting left. So that's where that comment of, oh, and that new target, sorry, that was as of September, is when they set that new target of 4.25%.
So now it's 4.75.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And again, that's the Fed fund rate, not mortgage rates.
Yeah, Fed fund rate. And so really the next round of inflation and all those other data points that I had on that slide, but inflation's the biggie, will determine the next increase. Right now, experts are pretty split on whether the Fed's going to go 50 or 75. And that could be good or bad news for mortgage rates, because mortgage rates always act ahead of what the Fed does. So they act in anticipation of what things are going to happen, and then they react based on what really happens. So if the consensus becomes more of a 50 basis point increase, and then it ends up being 75, then that's really bad news for mortgages, because they were anticipating one thing and the reality was something different, and that's bad news. That means there will be a stronger reaction. So we'll just have to see. Usually the Fed releases their minutes from their meeting, like notes on the meeting, and there's some more details in that. So there'll be things come out over the next weeks and months, or before the next weeks before the next Fed meeting. But yeah, that's where we're at. Okay, and now we're going to get into a little bit of the kind of the housing market, and I've showed this before in the last couple ones, that it's not a housing crash. This is every year since the last real housing crash, and we're still looking at about 85% accumulated appreciation since 2007. So there was a real crash in those years, right? But since then, it's been steady appreciation. In 2022, this may end up being a little bit lower than what I'm showing here, about 8% appreciation, but I still don't think we're going to see depreciation in 2022. I mean, if you took the last half of 2022 and maybe the first half of 2023, there's probably going to be some depreciation in there. But as a whole, I don't think we'll see depreciation in either year. And all this data lags, and so we won't really know for a while, but that's the best I can tell, is that I don't think we'll see.
You need to go right now.
Depreciation. So still not a housing crash. And then this was interesting. We've known this forever. I've talked about it, and I'm sure you've heard other people talked about it. Utah still has a housing shortage. So this is an article from the Deseret News, and I picked this one because it references the Kempsey Gardner Institute at the University of Utah, who does some really great work on the housing market. And this is a couple months old. This came out at the end of July. But we did make up some of the shortage in 2021, but we're still 31,000 housing units short.
I'm still missing.
And then a few things from here. So there it references the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute. So it just shows they added about 40,000 new housing units compared to 26,000 plus new households.
They're not.
And then, so that leaves us at 31,000 units short still. So yeah, and we've talked about that before, but I'll leave that there for now. Okay, I've wanted to do this forever and I finally did it. I wanted to look at housing affordability, and how I defined that is a mortgage payment as a percentage of monthly income. So here's,
Hey, Tyson.
yeah,
Part of the reason Tyson's wanted to do this, and I've wanted him to do it, is that we've all seen that meme go around where it shows interest rates, 18% in 1980, whatever. And hey, we're still so much better. We're still not at 18%. But just that information doesn't show the whole picture. We have to understand what interest rates are, sales prices compared to household income. So I love that Tyson did this. And Tyson, will you go ahead and make sure everyone's muted too, just in case we have some background on this? But I appreciate this again. This is the statistical guy put all this together, and it's just so interesting because people say, yeah, remember when rates were 18%? Well, compared to just that number, 7% is phenomenal, but we cannot just compare apples to oranges. Okay.
yeah. So there's really three main things we need to look at. We need to look at interest rates, we need to look at median household income, and we need to look at median home price. So luckily there's really good sources to find all those data. And so first, this is just mortgage rates. So you can see, and I went back to 1984 because that's actually the latest year that I could get good household income data. So that's as far back as we're going. But you can see, around 1985, we're at about 15%. So again, that's when you hear people, when I bought my first house, it was 15%. I don't know why everyone's complaining now. And we'll see why everyone's complaining now. So there's the 30-year fixed rate mortgage. And then these are on two separate scales. So over here, we've got house price, the house price scale in yellow, and then the income scale over here, and that's in green. So really what this shows is that the closer this gap is, the worse it is for
Affordability.
consumers. Yeah. And so we can see that this gap has basically disappeared, and just home prices have just skyrocketed. Okay. And we're going to see that's really what has caused housing affordability to get worse these past few years. So this next graph shows, so I basically combined all those three into, so this is showing what your house payment is as a percentage of your monthly income. So, and you are here, right? So all the way back from 1984, it's almost the worst time. So, 84, 85, we're getting 50% of your income is your house payment. And we're about there now. We're in that same range. So even though interest rates are half of what they were in 1985, you factor in income and home prices, and it's just become really unaffordable.
And one thing I want to note here is that I personally and other mortgage professionals I've chatted with are noticing this too. Wages are going up. A lot of the people we talk to either recently got a raise or they expect a good raise in the next 30 to 90 days. And so I think there are things happening in a lot of sectors. Unfortunately, usually not your lower service end jobs, but in a lot of sectors, people are starting to earn more. And so that's going to help some, but that's kind of a scary graph. And that's where we need to understand the pain really that a lot of people are feeling that want to buy a house or want to sell their house.
Is this only reflective of mortgages and not rents, or is it both, or how is this?
Good question.
This is just mortgages. This is just home ownership. I didn't take into account rents right now. So this is just if you were to get a mortgage at the current, whatever year we're looking at, if you were to get a mortgage with a median house price and the average 30-year, a standard 30-year fixed, that's how I calculated the house payment. And then I just compared that to the median household income.
And the median household income data is probably a year old, would you say, Tyson?
No, it was, well, I mean, it goes up until the third quarter of
Oh, okay, cool.
this year.
Okay,
So
got it.
it was
So it is
pretty
fairly
up to date.
recent.
I mean, with, like Bliss was saying, when as wages increase, that's going to lag a little bit behind in this, but for the most part, this is pretty up to date, at least through the summer of this year.
Mhm.
And I think the thing that's hard right now, even though we're still 30,000 units short, household units short in Utah, I mean, look at this. We went from, so basically how to interpret this graph is the lower you are down here, the better time it is to buy a house. Or you can buy a house for a smaller percentage of your income compared to your household income on a monthly basis. So best times in the past 40-ish years to buy a house, right after the housing crash, right? We're pretty low through these few years, 2009 to 2013. Interest rates were reasonable. They were around 4 to 5%. Home prices were really low. And wages actually held out pretty well during that time. So that's one of the best times in history, recent history. And then just a few years ago, when interest rates bottomed out at 2.5%, 3%, that was a great time to buy a house. But then we get this double whammy of rising home prices and interest rates more than doubling, right? And that makes a big difference. So I don't expect this trend to continue at all because we have seen home prices come down. And then I do think we're at a turning point with interest rates here pretty soon. But we just have to realize that there are still, as we'll get into in a few slides, there's still a lot of good reasons to buy a house, but there is a huge demographic of people that want to buy a house that simply can't afford it right now. And hopefully that doesn't last too much longer, but that's just the truth. We just have to realize that right now.
And the thing is, pretty much everybody that's on this call, this is their career. So those people that can't afford to buy a house right now, and we can talk about this more, but you're going to build relationships with them now and be empathetic to their situation now. So when it does improve, you're there for them when they're ready to buy a house. You're just really, by understanding this, you're securing future business and being that trusted advisor for your clients.
Yep. Okay, cool. Well, I just had to do that analysis because I was sick of everyone saying that we should all stop complaining because interest rates were 15% in the 80s. There's a lot of factors that go into it. And anyway, that's where we're at. I really hope that this is the peak. And it has to come down. I was going to put a slide somewhere in here, but I forgot to. And Bliss and I did a little Facebook video about this a while ago, but we're at a point in our economy where we just can't handle many more rate increases without either going into a deep recession or just backing off a little bit. And it's because every time the Fed increases interest rates, we talk a lot about mortgage rates because that's very applicable to us, but that means people's credit card interest rates are going up, auto loan rates are going up. It affects everything. And the federal government has, I'm going to mess up the numbers. I think it's $30 trillion in debt that they have to service. And so every time the Fed raises rates, their debt servicing payments go up. And then American consumers have like $16 trillion in debt that they have to service. And so there has to be a point where we just can't take it anymore. And I think the Fed is trying to find that without plunging us into a deep recession. So we have to be getting close because the way monetary policy works, we just can't handle much more. So we're getting close. Okay, and then there's a few slides here that Bliss is going to talk about just kind of what we can do in this market. What actions can we actually take? So there's a lot out of our control, but what can we do?
Tyson, that was awesome. Thank you so much. Like seriously, and you don't have to repeat exactly what Tyson said, but you can even just simply share with your clients, hey, I was on a conference call yesterday and we were talking about the market and here's the general feeling of we've got to be close to the top. So yes, take this information and just pull out of it just some talking points for your clients. All right, so this is educate your clients. All right, reasons to buy now, the cons. There's really one. Well, I'm going to say there's another one we don't have on here. Interest rates, and really the second one would be inability to qualify, right? And that's not even a con. That's just black and white. I cannot do it. Okay. But let's talk about the pros, because if we are 30,000 units short of being of having enough housing for everyone in the state of Utah, there are still people that qualify to buy a house. You don't have 20 people in the first 6 hours a house comes on the market walking through it and 8 offers within the first 24 hours. You don't have that, right? But here are some of the positive reasons to buy a house. The inventory's up, more choices. Oh my goodness, sellers are so willing to pay for the 2-1 buy down or a temporary buy down. And Tyson and I are happy to run those numbers for you and your sellers or your buyers on specific houses, because that's been a magic thing that probably, I don't know, the last 4 out of the last 5 closings in the last month, we've had sellers pay the 2-1 buy down. Makes it affordable. Sales prices are going down. Sellers willing to negotiate repairs. No bidding wars. Oh, thank goodness. No more panic buying. We all know somebody that bought a house in the last 18 months that are like, oh, wish I hadn't done that. Didn't do the inspection or didn't ask for any repairs, right? People can really make sure they're doing what's in their best interest. Refinance when rates drop. So date the rate, marry the house, and divorce the landlord, right? I'm going to repeat that. Date the rate, marry the house, divorce the landlord. Maybe I should have said that in reverse order. Divorce, date, and then marry, probably to be morally, ethically. Okay, we get it. We get it. You don't need non-refundable earnest money. I sold my house in February and I think they gave me 10 grand non-refundable earnest money. And she was pregnant. I think she was going to offer me her baby. I didn't want it, but I mean, that's just how it was, right? I heard someone got a brand new car and the buyers offered them. They worked for a car dealership, right? There was some crazy stuff going on. And then we know historically, it might not be in the next 6 months, but historically, we know that market values will continue to trend up. And so it is still absolutely one of the absolute best long-term investments that you can have. So look at that list, right? If you can afford it, these are all the reasons why it's such a great time to be a buyer. These are also great reasons to sell with your, to share with your seller. First of all, to create some what's the word? Expectations that they're going to be asked for some concessions, and they need to have that understanding in their net sheet of what they might walk away with. But you know, you're helping them to understand, here's why it's a good time to list your house, because it's still good time to be a buyer. There aren't as many, but here's the reasons. You need to really have your head wrapped around the fact that they're going to ask for some repairs. They're probably going to ask for some concessions. But honestly, it's a good time. Our market is going to be returning to normal. It hasn't been normal for a while. And normal doesn't mean it's not painful. Normal just means we're not going crazy high anymore. We're just in a normal appreciation market. So Tyson, go ahead and go to the next one. I love this. Keep calm and carry on. This is our industry, right? We're all in the housing industry because we love it. Now, it doesn't mean there aren't times that we don't hate it. I've had some little hateful thoughts lately about my industry and in the housing market, but overall, I always joke, I don't know how to do anything else, but the truth is I don't want to do anything else. I absolutely love what I do, even in a tough market. It's really an amazing industry where we get to truly help people with the absolute, one of the biggest events in their life and become lifelong friends with them. It's a blessing. It really is to be in this industry, even in the rough times. All right, so here's some ideas for you guys to take forward. Improve your relationships. You know, when we're done with this, why don't you, we're gonna send out the recording of it. You could go in and take 1 or 2 little snapshots, do a quick video, post it on social media, say, hey, you know what, went to this class today. There's a lot of good reasons to be a buyer right now. Yes, it's tough. It's tough, but let's talk about it. Give me a call and let's see if it's the right time for you, right? So a reason for you to reach out to your database and talk to them about the market, because people are scared and they're uncertain. Even the people that don't want to sell and don't want to buy, they're still scared and uncertain. So talk with them about it. Talk with them about the long-term appreciation that we're going to see. All right. Put in the time. So November and December, historically, people in our industry, we kind of step back. And we basically say, yeah, you know what, this is the slow time. You know, it's the holidays. I don't want to bug people too much. I'm just going to kind of slow down. I would like to suggest you do the opposite. 100 hours of doing things that might be a little uncomfortable, or things that you're not sure you really want to be doing, can translate into 1,000 hours in profitability. And so use your time in November and December, and I guarantee you, and I know this is going to happen. It happens to me every year, but I think 2023 is going to blow that out of the water. Come January, our phones are going to ring and ring and ring with people saying, all right, let's talk about it. Do you think I should do something now? What are interest rates at? House prices have come down. I think I can afford it. I got a raise. I want to do something, right? So if you take the next 2 months and kind of sit back, you're not going to be prepared for that. Your phone won't ring like it will for someone that takes November and December and works on those relationships. And then deepen your knowledge. Well, kudos to you guys. You're already doing it. You're here today, but there are it's almost overwhelming, the amount of resources out there. I've been listening to some podcasts, Ninja Selling, which is amazing. And then the ones that are real estate. Oh, I love Brian Buffini. I think it's because I love his accent. Don't tell my husband. But there's some amazing resources out there, and you guys are in your cars a lot. So take that time to deepen your knowledge, but also deepen your commitment and your motivation. That's why I listen to podcasts. Is I usually get inspired to do something or to take action, even if it's not specifically related to that podcast, but listening to it motivated me to do something or improve on something. And then take this time. This is such a great time to refine your processes, right? Go, especially if it's weather like this, you're probably not going to be out and about in it. Go through everything you do, every touch you have with your client, every system that you're utilizing, and improve on it. Back when I used to do a lot of coaching, one of my first questions was, what tools or systems or services do you subscribe to? And there was I mainly coached mortgage people. There was a couple of things that people paid a lot of money. One of them was called Loan Toolbox. And they paid, I don't know what the subscription cost, but it was expensive, right? It was basically all kinds of resources to help you be better, and flyers and all kinds of stuff. 95% of everyone I spoke to said, yeah, I probably don't even use 10% of what's in that system. I just haven't taken the time to learn it, or haven't taken the time to see what all is there that I could use. I'm like, dang, they're making a lot of money off of you. You need to do that. So, right, look at all your subscriptions, look at all your resources, and there's free stuff everywhere, right? And so take this time, or here's a really fun idea that I've done with my team before. We actually took dry erase markers, and we're up at Bear Lake at my friend's cabin where she has all these big windows. And we started at the beginning with a phone call from a prospect. And we basically diagrammed out every single tangible touch we could have with them all the way through post-closing to infinity, right? Because we stay in touch with our clients forever. And it was just so interesting to see all of these different touches, where we could improve and where we were kind of missing the boat on things, especially in the prospect stage where the client doesn't take action right away. Don't let them slip through the cracks, because at some point they're going to be ready to do something. So use that time to refine your processes. All right, that's what we had to share with you guys. We are so glad that you all took the time today. I know it did take you kind of away from other stuff you had going on, but we really appreciate it. We value that you trust us to give you this information. And again, we are just happy to be a resource for you and your clients. So reach out to either Tyson or I by text, email, phone, any way that's convenient for you guys. And we're just here to be there, be that resource for you and your clients to kind of be a team. So they just feel this immense amount of security and trust that we're going to guide them in the right direction. So Tyson, anything you want to add?
No, I think that's great. I'm just happy to share this with you guys and hopefully you found something valuable from it. If you have any follow-up questions, I mean, I guess we could take a few minutes now if anyone has questions, or yeah, just reach out to us. I'd be happy to get more in depth with anything I talked about.
Awesome. We'll go ahead and stop the recording, but Tyson and I'll stay on for a minute or two if anybody has any questions.